Today, we're going to take a closer and more thoughtful look at a statement that has recently been circulating among observers of Iraq's financial landscape and among followers of the Iraqi dinar. The statement suggests that the key requirement for a potential change in Iraq's exchange rate is security and stability. It further argues that stability must first come from Iraq itself, and then from the broader regional environment, particularly Iran. According to this view, Iraq may already be in a relatively stable position, but the region as a whole still needs further alignment before any major currency policy changes occur. This type of claim often sparks strong reactions among people who closely follow Iraq's economic developments. However, to properly understand what such a statement might mean, it is important to analyze it through the lens of economic policy, regional geopolitics, and the practical realities of how exchange rates are managed by central banks and governments. When we talk about exchange rates, especially in the case of a country like Iraq, we are not simply discussing a number on a screen. An exchange rate reflects a complex combination of economic fundamentals, monetary policy decisions, fiscal stability, political conditions, and investor confidence. For the Iraqi dinar, the exchange rate is currently managed through a system that is closely tied to the US dollar, and the value is influenced heavily by oil revenues, foreign currency reserves, and the country's financial institutions. Security and stability are indeed major components in this equation. For many years, Iraq has worked to rebuild its institutions following periods of conflict and political fragmentation. Over the past decade, the country has gradually strengthened its central government, improved cooperation between political blocs, and increased coordination between financial authorities and international institutions. The idea that stability must first come from within Iraq is widely supported by economists and policy analysts. Domestic stability creates the foundation for economic growth, investment, and financial reform. When a government can operate consistently, enforce regulations, and manage its fiscal responsibilities, confidence begins to grow among both domestic businesses and international investors. One of the key institutions in this process is Iraq's central bank. The central bank is responsible for maintaining monetary stability, managing foreign reserves, regulating the banking sector, and overseeing the currency exchange system. Any adjustment to the official exchange rate would require careful coordination between the central bank, the government, and international financial partners. Over the past several years, Iraq has taken a number of steps to strengthen its financial infrastructure. Banking reforms, improvements in compliance with international financial regulations, and efforts to modernize payment systems have all been part of this broader process. These developments are not necessarily dramatic headlines, but they represent important groundwork for long-term economic stability. Now let's consider the second part of the statement, which suggests that regional conditions, particularly involving Iran, also play an important role. This aspect reflects the broader geopolitical reality that Iraq exists within a highly interconnected region. Political and economic developments in neighboring countries often have direct or indirect effects on Iraq's economy. Iran, in particular, has significant economic and political ties with Iraq. The two countries share extensive trade relationships, energy connections, and cross-border financial activity. Electricity imports, natural gas supplies, and consumer goods trade all link the two economies in meaningful ways. Because of these connections, developments involving Iran can influence Iraq's financial system. For example, international sanctions affecting Iran can create complications for cross-border payments, banking transactions, and energy agreements. When financial systems become complicated by sanctions or regulatory restrictions, it can place additional pressure on regional banking networks and foreign currency flows. For Iraq, maintaining financial transparency and compliance with global standards is extremely important. International financial institutions and major global banks require clear regulatory frameworks and predictable policies before expanding financial cooperation. Therefore, regional stability and regulatory clarity across neighboring countries can indirectly affect Iraq's financial confidence and investment environment. However, it is also important to emphasize that Iraq's currency policy is ultimately determined by Iraq's own economic institutions. The central bank does not simply adjust the exchange rate based on political developments in neighboring countries. Instead, it evaluates a wide range of economic indicators, including inflation, fiscal policy, foreign reserves, trade balances, and overall financial stability. At the moment, Iraq continues to operate under a managed exchange rate system. This means the value of the dinar is set within a policy framework designed to maintain stability and control inflation. Such systems are commonly used by countries that rely heavily on a single export commodity, such as oil, because they help stabilize government revenue and budget planning. Oil exports remain the backbone of Iraq's economy. The country is one of the world's major oil producers, and petroleum sales generate the vast majority of government revenue. When oil prices are strong, Iraq's foreign currency reserves tend to increase. These reserves provide financial security and allow the central bank to support the currency when necessary. Strong reserves are one of the most important factors supporting currency stability. Iraq has spent years rebuilding its reserve levels, which are held primarily in foreign currencies and gold. These reserves allow the central bank to manage liquidity in the domestic market and ensure that the government can meet international financial obligations. Another important factor is inflation control. A central bank must maintain price stability before considering significant adjustments to exchange rate policy. Rapid changes in currency value can have unintended consequences for domestic prices, purchasing power, and overall economic confidence. Therefore, monetary authorities typically move cautiously and prioritize gradual reforms rather than sudden shifts. Political stability also plays a critical role. When governments experience frequent changes or internal disagreements, it can create uncertainty for investors and financial institutions. Over the past several years, Iraq has worked to build more consistent governance structures, which has contributed to a more predictable policy environment. Infrastructure development and economic diversification are also part of the broader picture. Iraq has been working to expand sectors such as construction, transportation, agriculture, and digital services. While oil remains dominant, diversification efforts can strengthen the long-term foundation of the economy and reduce vulnerability to fluctuations in global energy prices. Regional diplomacy also influences economic prospects. Iraq has increasingly positioned itself as a bridge between different regional powers, hosting diplomatic discussions and encouraging economic cooperation across the Middle East. This diplomatic approach can help reduce tensions and create opportunities for trade and investment. From a short-term perspective, followers of the Iraqi dinar should focus on measurable indicators rather than speculative timelines. Key indicators include foreign reserve levels, inflation trends, banking reforms, energy production, and fiscal policy decisions. These factors provide real insight into the direction of Iraq's economic policy. In the near term, the central bank is likely to continue prioritizing currency stability and financial system modernization. This includes strengthening compliance with international banking regulations, improving transparency in foreign exchange markets, and expanding digital payment systems across the country. Over the longer term, Iraq's economic potential remains significant. The country possesses vast natural resources, a young population, and a strategic geographic position connecting major regional markets. If governance reforms continue and investment flows increase, Iraq could gradually expand its economic influence within the region. However, long-term growth depends on consistent policy implementation. Investors typically look for predictable legal systems and transparent regulations and stable financial institutions before committing significant capital to emerging markets. Iraq has made progress in these areas, but continued improvement will be necessary to sustain momentum. Another long-term factor is integration with the global financial system. As Iraq strengthens its banking sector and improves regulatory compliance, international partnerships may expand. This can lead to increased trade financing, foreign direct investment, and broader economic cooperation. For people who follow the Iraqi dinar closely, it is helpful to view developments through a realistic economic lens. Currency policy changes rarely occur suddenly or in isolation. Instead, they are the result of years of structural reforms, financial discipline, and gradual improvements in economic conditions. Statements suggesting that a new exchange rate depends entirely on one external factor can sometimes oversimplify a much more complex process. In reality, exchange rate policy is influenced by a combination of domestic stability, fiscal management, monetary policy, and regional dynamics. The concept of security and stability is still very relevant, but it should be understood in a broad sense. Stability includes political governance, financial regulation, banking system strength, international partnerships, and regional cooperation. Each of these components contributes to the overall confidence that supports a nation's currency. In Iraq's case, progress in these areas has been gradual but noticeable. Infrastructure rebuilding, improvements in energy production, and modernization of financial systems are all steps that support long-term economic resilience. While challenges remain, the overall trajectory of reform continues to be closely monitored by economists and international institutions. Ultimately, the future of Iraq's exchange rate policy will depend on the decisions made by Iraqi policymakers and the evolving economic environment. Analysts will continue to evaluate data, policy announcements, and regional developments to understand how these factors might influence Iraq's financial strategy. For followers of the Iraqi Dinar, staying informed through credible analysis and verified economic information is the most responsible approach. Understanding the broader context behind policy discussions can help separate speculation from measurable economic trends. As always, we will continue monitoring developments in Iraq's economy, financial reforms, and regional relationships so that you can stay informed with balanced and factual updates. If you want to stay up to date with responsible analysis and real developments related to the Iraqi dinar and Iraq's economy, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. And as always, please remember that this content is provided for informational purposes only. It is not financial advice, and viewers should always conduct their own research or consult with qualified financial professionals before making any investment decisions.